Hello and welcome to the Bibble IT online training course for the 7680 Windows 7 exam. This is section 1, module 2. So the items we're going to be looking at today include installing Windows 7, the different types of installs that you can do, how you go about dual booting with Windows 7, and the various ways that you can upgrade Windows 7. So either upgrading between Windows 7 versions or from XP or from Vista. So installing Windows 7, there's three main ways of installing Windows 7, either using the DVD that you bought in the shops or a DVD you've created yourself from a download edition of Windows 7, via USB stick, and I'll show you how to create a bootable USB in the next part, or either installing it over the network, either from file shares or using a tool such as WDS, Windows Deployment Services. One of the things you'll need to know for the exam is which of these methods is appropriate in different scenarios. So it's worth bearing in mind that if you want to modify your install source in any way, using the DVD, you'd have to reburn a DVD each and every time you did that. Same with the USB stick, slightly more flexible. You can modify the files directly on the USB drive, or you'd modify them on your central location and then recopy them back to your USB stick. But with a network install, you have one repository to make changes to. So if you're booting up multiple machines and all doing the same install from a network location, you would just need to make that change in the one location. So just worth bearing that in mind. So the USB drive install method, you need to have for this a bootable USB drive. Obviously also your USB drive has to be big enough to contain all the Windows 7 install files, which is around 2 to 3 gigabytes depending on the type of Windows 7 that you have, the edition. The x86 version is slightly smaller than the 64-bit editions. So the tool we use to create a bootable USB drive is called diskpart, and these are the commands in the order that you would need to run them in. So what we're going to do here is if I hop onto the PC and run a command prompt window. Now just before we start this, if we look under my computer, you can see here this is my USB drive. It's currently blank, but it doesn't have to be. And we've also got the Windows 7 install media. This is the professional edition. This USB drive, we're going to format it, so make sure that whatever you've got on there data-wise you don't need to have a copy of. So if I hop back into our command window, then the tool we're going to run is called diskpart. And because I'm running this from a standard command line, it's going to ask me for elevation. So I'm going to click on yes. We get another window here for diskpart. So the first command then is list space disk. This shows us all of the disks in our system. Be very careful at this point that you don't pick the wrong disk. I've done this before where I formatted my primary hard drive. It wasn't pretty. So we want to select the disk we want to use then, which is select space disk, and then in our case it's disk 1 because my USB drive is 8 gigs big, so disk 1 here. Great, so the first thing we need to do then is clean the disk. This is going to scrub everything off it, and then we're going to create ourselves a new partition. So create partition, primary. Then the next thing we want to do is format that new partition. So format space fs for file system equals FAT32 or NTFS, but in our case we're going to use FAT32, and then quick because I don't want this to take too long. There's no point doing a full format on it. So now there we go, we've got our partition ready to go. Last thing we need to do is make this partition active. So just type active in there. Mark the current partition as active, and we're done. We can quit out of diskpart, and if we have a look back in my computer, we've now got our usable USB drive. Last thing we need to do, open up our Windows 7 DVD, select all the contents, copy, and paste them back onto our memory stick. So I'm just going to pause the video here. So that then's everything copied across to the USB drive. All we need to do now is reboot the computer and then set up your BIOS to either boot from USB or enter your BIOS bootloader menu and choose the USB drive. Okay, next we're going to look at the network share install. What we've got here is our user with their computer or their laptop that we want to install Windows 7 on. And then over here we've got some kind of a file server. On this file server we've got a folder which we've shared off our varying Windows 7 images. That's one of them over here. So with a network share install, you either boot from a USB stick or some sort of a CD, and you boot up the machine into a Windows PE environment. Windows PE stands for Windows Pre-install. If you've ever run the Vista or Windows 7 setups, you've actually been using a pre-install environment there. The PE environment that we need for this is going to have to be specially created, and that's something that we'll cover in one of the later sections. The PE environment boots up into a very lightweight version of the operating system. It's capable of accessing hard drives, network devices, any other devices that you've got in your system, as long as you've given it the right drivers. So after you've created your Windows PE install, you would go across and you'd map a network folder to this folder share on your server. The way you would do that is, if I run a command prompt, obviously this is doing it from the full version of Windows, but you'd use the net space use, then you'd pick a drive letter, space, then the name of the computer that you want, so // and then my server name, and then my Win7 install folder. You could then use /user and provide your user account in the format of domain/username. If I press return here, it's going to fail because that server doesn't actually exist on my network. If it did, I'd then be prompted for the password for that username. I'd put it in, I'd then be able to browse the Y drive and then run setup.exe. What would then happen is, just as if I'd initially booted off the CD or the USB drive directly into Windows 7, is the setup program would run on the machine here. It would then copy the Windows 7 install files onto the machine and then apply them to itself. So it's a two-step process. You need to copy all that across the network and then install it on the machine. So the reason for using the network share install method is, if I want to slipstream any patches or any applications into my source image, I don't then need to reburn all of my distribution media. The only time I would need to update the CD or my USB image that contains the Windows PE environment is if my hardware changes and I no longer have the correct drivers to access either the storage controller or the network controller on this machine. In that case, I'd recreate my PE image with the extra drivers in and then reburn and redistribute my USB sticks. Okay, next then, WDS. WDS lets you boot directly off your network card if you want to, so if you've got a machine for some reason that can't boot from CD or USB, you're able to directly boot that machine. Likewise, if you've got a PC that can't boot from the network card for whatever reason, you can still use a specially created USB or CD drive. It's a slightly different version of Windows PE that it would boot into. That's because the version that comes with WDS is configured so that it will automatically go away and connect to the WDS server, so there's none of this whole net use or trying to attach network folders. If I've got my WDS server over here, and this time we've got, say, 2 or 3 different install images, and we've got our machine that we want to boot off the network card. Again, pick the network card as the boot device from your BIOS. What happens is that goes off, talks to the DHCP server, and it then makes a PXE boot request after it's got an IP. The PXE boot request goes across the network, will be picked up by the WDS server, which will then reply and contain a bootloader that lets the machine load up into memory into a Windows PE environment. Once it's booted up into Windows PE, it goes across, talks to the Windows PE server again, but this time it automatically asks you for a username and password. You type them into the box, they get authenticated against Active Directory, and then in the nice easy to use menu on the PE installation, it shows you a list of the images that you can apply to your machine. So say you've got this image that has got specific applications in for your HR department, you might not want someone in your accounting department to be able to deploy that image of Windows to their machine. So using WDS, you would say that this is only available to this group of users, so that when the user boots their machine and it's asked for a username and password, they will only see the images that they're entitled to. What then happens is the user picks the image that they want to install, and this time, instead of the file copying across to the machine and then applying, what then happens is the image is directly applied to the machine, so slightly faster because we're not having to download and then install it. So that's the end of our look through of WDS. Next is the different install types. There's 2 install types that you would generally use. One is the standard install, where you don't pre-supply any information, and the setup will ask you things like your computer name, what network location you want it to be present on, a username, a password, all those sorts of things. Or you can do an unattended install, where you pre-supply the answers to those questions. You create an unattend.xml file and you put it generally on the root of a USB stick that you then attach to the computer. What setup does is it will look for that file on the root of any of the attached drives. If it finds it, it will use that to supply all the answers to the questions if they're valid. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to fire up a new virtual machine and just run through a speeded up version of the standard installation so that you can see the different questions that you would need to supply answers to. So here then is my virtual machine that's booting up from the CD that I've supplied it. The CD is a copy of Windows 7 Professional. Okay, first thing you wanted to know, this is our Windows PE environment, by the way, that's been skinned with the Windows 7 setup. First thing is our location. So we're going to pick UK because that's my keyboard language. Next, and then install now. It's just worth noting you do have the option, if this is a machine that's already got Windows 7 installed, you can boot back off your original source media and try and repair the computer. Things like if your bootloader has been overwritten, there's a little wizard in here that'll step through and try and recover that sort of stuff for you. So in our case, we're just going to click on this and do install now. And the first thing, install Windows. This is our licensing agreement. So we tick the box, accept the license agreement. Of course, you should read that all the way through to the bottom, and then click on next. Custom installation. We haven't got a previous operating system on this machine, so we want to do a custom install. Generally, you would just pick next, and it will pre-format these partitions for you, but because we're doing it as a run-through, I want to show you what happens if I click on advanced and create a new partition, and then apply. You see that we get this message warning us that Windows is going to automatically create some extra partitions for us. If we click on OK, you see that we get this 100 megabyte reserved partition. The reason it does this is just to prepare the system in case you ever want to use BitLock or whole drive encryption. That requires that the boot device is left unencrypted. So what Windows is actually doing is it's going to install the bootloader onto this partition and then actually install itself onto partition 2. So we're going to select next, and then I'm just going to run this through at double speed or triple speed until the install comes to the end, when it starts asking us some more questions. Okay, so here we are at the end of the Windows 7 setup, hopefully one of the fastest ones by the time I've sped that up. Now, we're being asked two questions here. First of all, for a username, and then for a PC name. Now, I've actually already typed something in here, but normally what would happen is, as you type your username in, it will pre-fill out the computer name. So if I type my username of Ben, it would put in Ben-PC for me. Now, there's a few things to bear in mind. In the username field, I can't use a username that's already on the machine. Now, there's two that are created by default. There's the administrator account. So if I type that in and click next, it's not going to allow us. And the second one is guest. There's already a guest account on the machine as well. So we're going to use test user for our username. And then in the computer name, you can only have up to 15 letters, and also you can't have certain kinds of symbols. So we're just going to call this our Win7 test PC. Click on next, and we don't have to put a password in here, but it is recommended. If we do put a password in, and then I'm going to type that again underneath, you'll notice that we have to provide a password hint. With Vista that was optional, with Windows 7 you have to provide a hint. Click on next and we'll be asked for our product key. Now, you don't have to supply the product key at this time. However, if you don't, within 30 days you'll need to put the product key in and activate it. Also, you don't have to activate this machine straight away. If you do tick that box, if Windows detects that it's online, it will activate it as soon as setup is finished. In our case, we're going to click on next because this install is going to be deleted as soon as we finish this video. Next thing it wants to know, how do we want to handle our Windows updates? Well, generally I'd recommend you do the recommended settings. That is, at 3 AM the machine will go off, talk to Windows Update, download and install any patches and hotfixes that are required. However, in a corporate environment, you might want to say, ask me later, or you might just want to install important updates only, or this might be irrelevant because it's going to be controlled all through group policy anyway. For our test machine, we're going to do recommended settings. Now, lastly, time zones. In our case, because we said we're in an English keyboard location, it's picked up that we probably want to be in the English time zone. Adjust that as required and click on next. And there we go, that's us finished. That's our desktop and everything installed on our machine. First thing you probably want to do is just go into Computer Manager Check under Device Manager that you've got all the drivers for all the bits and pieces of hardware that are in your computer. In my case, this is a virtual machine, so I haven't installed the integration components, so it's missing some drivers for the audio devices, and there's a few unknowns in there. Okay, so that's the end of our standard Windows 7 installation, so we're just going to minimize and get rid of that. The unattended install and how to create the unattended.xml, we'll cover that in a later section when we discuss creating, managing and maintaining system images. Okay then, dual booting Windows 7. You might find that you want to keep your existing copy of Windows XP on your machine or your existing copy of Vista, but you'd like to also be able to install Windows 7 alongside it. The thing to bear in mind with dual booting is you must install the oldest operating system first. There's no point installing Windows 7 and then deciding that you want to put XP on there as well. You need to start again with XP on first and then Windows 7. The idea is that the older OSs are not able to detect the newer operating systems, but the newer operating systems such as Windows 7, because it's come out after Vista and after XP, will be able to detect and automatically add them into its boot menu. Make sure that each operating system is set up with its own partition or hard drive. The way you would do this is back when we did our installation and we chose the advanced method of install, we'd make sure we picked a partition that didn't already have a version of Windows installed on it already. There's a few command tools that you might find handy that will help you look after the boot options that you get. BCD Edit is the default command tool that comes with Windows that lets you change these settings. If I on the virtual machine just open up an elevated command prompt here, I'll show you what that command looks like. This time we're going to run as administrator the actual command window because I know that it won't prompt me properly. So BCD Edit is the tool. If we do /?, it gives us all of the information here, all the different switches. So things like we can create a new boot store, we can delete an entry from it, we can copy, we can create, we can add, etc. One that might be quite useful is in num. And this just gives us here a list of all the different operating systems that this copy of Windows 7 it knows about and is able to boot from. So if we look here, we've got a default timeout of 30 seconds. We're going to boot from hard disk volume 1, and it's EN/US as our location for this edition of Windows. The other place you'd be able to see this information, if I go and right-click on my computer and bring up the properties and go into Advanced System Settings, and then make sure you're on the Advanced tab, here into Startup and Recovery Settings, it will also list the different operating systems you've got installed on your machine, and you can change any of these options here as to what your default one is and what the timeout for the window when you boot up will be before it picks your default option. Just as a side note here, it's not relevant for the exam, but you won't be asked for this. There's a very handy tool called Easy BCD. I recommend if you're doing any sort of dual booting, you have a look on the internet, search for Easy BCD, install that, and it gives you a very nice, very easy to use graphical interface for managing your bootloader. Okay, next then, and lastly in this module, upgrading Windows 7. There's three types of upgrade you can perform. You can do a Windows Anytime upgrade, which means that if you, say, purchase the Home Premium Edition, but you find that you really want something that's in the Ultimate Edition of Windows, instead of having to go out and buy a plain copy of Ultimate Edition, you can buy an upgrade from your Home Premium to Ultimate. You can upgrade from a Windows Vista machine to Windows 7, or you can migrate from Windows XP to Windows 7. Just be very careful there, the different terminology that's been used. It is not possible to install Windows 7 over the top of Windows XP and maintain all of your settings and programs automatically. You need to do a migration, which means that you will wipe your Windows XP machine and then reinstall Windows 7 fresh over the top. Now, there are different tools you can use that will pull off your settings, your personal settings and preferences, so that when you put your Windows 7 machine on, it can copy those preferences back into the Windows 7 installation, but it won't do it for you. However, if you have Vista on your machine, you can do a direct in-place upgrade where all your programs and settings will be carried through from Vista into Windows 7. So first of all, then Windows Anytime Upgrade. Anytime Upgrade lets you upgrade between editions of Windows 7. It's worth noting that you can't upgrade between different architectures. So if you've got 32-bit version of Home Premium and you want to install the 64-bit edition of Professional, you would have to format and start again to do that. If I drop out into my machine here and type on the Start menu Anytime Upgrade, there's a little wizard that's included on the machines. It's worth mentioning if you have Ultimate or Enterprise, you probably won't be able to find this wizard because there's nothing that you can upgrade to, so the component won't be there. If I run that, I get two different options. I can either go online and download and pay for directly from Microsoft a product key that will let me upgrade between my different versions. So you can see here, to upgrade from my Professional Edition to Ultimate, I can pay £85 and buy that now. Or if I go back, I can enter an upgrade key. So if I've purchased that from, say, Amazon or another online provider, I can just type my key in here, click on Next, and it will go away and install all of the features to take me between these different versions. So next, upgrading from Vista. You can upgrade directly from Windows Vista, as I mentioned before. However, it's worth noting that if you've got the Home Premium edition of Vista, that translates to Home Premium of Windows 7, Business to Professional, Ultimate to Ultimate. You can't upgrade to Windows 7 Starter or Home Basic editions from Vista. The lowest one you'd be able to upgrade to would be Windows 7 Home Premium. You can't also upgrade between different architectures. So again, if you had 32-bit edition of Vista, but you wanted to move to the 64-bit edition of Windows 7, you're not able to do that directly. You would have to format and start again. There's an Upgrade Advisor tool that will run, check all your hardware for compatibility, make sure that everything will work properly for you on Windows 7. Make sure when you run that you've got all the different printers, extra hardware that you would normally use on your machine plugged in, so you can check that all of those will work. You might well find that it'll tell you that some of your applications aren't compatible with Windows 7 and advise that you remove them before you do the upgrade. Likewise, it might well warn you that some of your printer drivers might not work or anything like that. It just gives you a bit of a heads up before you install Windows 7 and find that something that you absolutely 100% need to be working won't. It's also worth noting that when you're doing an upgrade installation, right up until the point where you do your first login as the Windows 7 user, you can or it can roll back automatically if anything goes wrong. So if something messes up during the installation, it'll fall back, remove Windows 7 and leave you back with your original Vista machine. So lastly then, in this module, migration from Windows XP. You can't directly upgrade a PC from Windows XP to Windows 7. There's two types of migrations that you can do. You can do a side-by-side migration, so if you've gone out and bought a new computer that comes with a Windows 7, it is possible to still transfer your settings from your XP machine across to your Windows 7 machine. You can't transfer the programs. You would need to manually reinstall the programs on the new computer. The other type of method of doing the migration is a wipe and load. You would back up all of your settings on your Windows XP machine. You would then format, reinstall Windows 7 over the top of XP, and then restore your settings back in. The last module that we're going to look at will cover how you make sure you keep hold of all your personal settings and information. Okay, that brings us to the end of Module 2. There was quite a lot of things there, so we're just going to have a quick summary of what you need to remember for the exam. We ran through the different installation methods. You need to know which of these will be applicable under what scenarios. So the DVD, that's not very flexible because anytime you change your source image, you need to make a new set of DVDs. USB, we talked about how you can use the DiskPart tool to create yourself a bootable USB by copying the files across from a Windows 7 DVD. We've got the network installation method where you can boot the machine up either from a DVD or from a USB stick into Windows PE. You can then connect to a network folder location and then run setup from there. Or WDS, you can boot the machines directly over the network, use Active Directory integration to work out what your user is allowed to see in terms of your different images and then install those directly on the machine. We've got two types of installation, standard or unattended. The file for an unattended installation is unattend.xml and you put that in the root of a USB memory device plugged into your computer. We talked about dual booting, and you need to remember to install the oldest operating system first so that Windows 7 is then capable of detecting that operating system, and that the command line tool for managing your boot options is bcdedit. Lastly, we talked about upgrading. We've got the Anytime upgrade, which lets you move between different editions of Windows 7. You can't downgrade, by the way. We've talked about upgrading from Windows Vista, and we also mentioned that there is no direct upgrade from Windows XP. You either have to wipe your machine and start again, or you move your settings from your old computer across to your new computer. Hope you've found these useful. Please let me know by dropping me some comments at www.bibble-it.com. Thank you.